So welcome everybody. I appreciate those of you who have turned your screens on because it's always easier for me when I can see people. So we are here to talk about HEAL and the conceptual clarity model. Oops, see, I knew this was too good to be true. Okay, we have a little demonstration for you.
I can see clearly now, the rain is gone.
This is a demonstration of the concept of conceptual clarity. How you take an idea and philosophy and make it so that everything that is put into it is conceptually clear. Looking at the glass in front of you, the first thing most people notice is that it's empty. That's often what happens when people start a new program. They have an idea for the program that doesn't have much form or thought to it. If you look more closely at the glass, you'll notice all of the lines running through it. These go all the way around and are embedded in the glass. These represent the things that we have in our communities and organizations that may impact our program or idea, but that we cannot change, like politics, regulations, resources, etc. Sometimes these things are seen as obstacles or problems. Oftentimes, that's the first thing that people notice or focus on or talk about when they're going to create something. Then people have some specific ideas. If you look closely at these beads, they are completely clear. Each bead in and of itself is clear, and each one represents an idea, a policy, or an exercise. You go to a conference and you get a whole bunch of ideas of things you'd like to add to your program. You hear somebody speak and you form some ideas of policies or procedures you'd like to add to your program. You find a video or some music you'd like to incorporate. You have interns or new staff and they have some ideas and they add to the program. And each of these ideas that's being added is clear in and of itself. And if you watch what's happening to our glass, it is filling up. Some of those obstacles or lines that we saw are not as clear, but it still looks very messy in there. Now, here's what happens when we add conceptual clarity. This is when your philosophy and your guiding principles combine all those pieces that you've added together. And as you can see what's happening, everything gets clear. And even though those lines are still there, they are no longer what people first notice in the program. And it is full of different kinds of ideas, but they all work together to make one clear program. Now, I want to show you this same exercise in a way that you can use it both in your group room or if you work with individual clients. So again, we have our glass, but now we're going to call it the support glass. And again, you see all the lines. These are what people consider to be their defects, their experiences, the things that have kept them from being able to do things or interfered or caused them to make poor choices. And when you begin to fill this glass with support, you'll notice that all those negative things that they notice about themselves and that other people notice or see as their primary personality or characteristics begin to fade. Now, sometimes when people are getting support, they cover up and they don't accept all the support. And some of that support is blocked, spilling over and getting wasted. In both our conceptual clarity glass and our support glass, if it is left alone for a period of time, even if it is filled to the brim, the clarity or the support will disappear and evaporate. So on a regular basis, you have to make sure that you are either filling your support glass with support or your conceptual clarity glass with clarity. Thoughts? Hello? No thoughts about that?
I
Oh,
liked the idea. Whoops, am I supposed to raise my hand?
no, you're fine.
I liked the idea of um, getting the support that you need and being able to cut it off when you want to as an individual, but then recognizing the need for ongoing support because it will dry up and the lines will return. Um, once that water begins to evaporate. So I liked that concept of continuing to get the support that you need.
Well, and that's the point, is it's not that the things return, it's that they become more prominent because they're always there.
Right.
Isn't I, it like I can't change certain things that happen in the program in the community. There's like some stuff that is beyond my control. But by being clear about what we're doing, and that's where I'm going to take you into how that shows up, some of the ways that it manifests inside the program. But I have clients who, when we were in person, if they came into my office and they saw the support glass full, they would say, oh, somebody's having support issues, because they knew that that's what it meant. And so clients engage with it. And this is what happens when you are married to and or give birth to and or hang out with geeks. You learn how to do those things. So as I was talking about earlier, those program principles, and we're going to review them very briefly because I want to show you how they actually play out in the design of the curriculum and the policies and things that we put together. And so part of being conceptually clear is we have to be clear about what we're dealing with. And so we need to understand that battering is instrumental, it's strategic, it's purposeful behavior that's designed to bring about an outcome. Now, it doesn't mean it's the best thought out. It doesn't mean that they're purposely thinking, oh, can't wait to hurt somebody. Oftentimes they end up hurting someone. They end up with a disproportionate amount of control or power in the relationship as a result of what they were doing strategically and purposefully to make something happen. And so knowing what it is critical as you continue to move forward and help people. So this presumption of competence and this learned decision, so one of the ways that presumption of competence shows up in the room is that our groups are run by one of the men. And each week it's a different man. They're facilitated by the staff. But in terms of organizing things, helping people move along, keeping track of, timekeeping, making sure the group starts on time and ends on time, that is presumption of competence. These are grown-ups. They can handle this. It also builds for them the sense that this is their group, their community, their responsibility. I talked to you about the trauma piece. And in this morning's group, what happened was we had one person open up, did an okay accountability, which I'm going to talk about in a little bit. And then he passed to the next person, and the next person opened up. And when he was sharing his accountability, he went deep into his recovery. He thought he was going to, what he thought when he started was that he was sharing an accountability about, you know, his mother and stepfather renewing their vows, and that they had asked him to take part in the parking lot, and that his accountability was that he got up early and he was there on time. But as he talked and as he shared with us, he shared that the real accountability was the fact that he had become trustworthy, that his mother, who when I first met this man, you understand, and he needed gas money to get somewhere, would not give him, and told him, I will not even give you a quarter. I will go with you to the gas station and put gas in your car, but I will not give you a credit card. I will not give you not any cash at all. And his mother trusted him with her credit card. And as he got deep into that, he started going into, and there I was sitting in the car of somebody else and had the credit card and reflecting about how my family was more important than the drugs. And then he passed off to another man who went deep into his issue related to depression. And in the facilitation of this, okay, and he talked about the depression and how it comes up and ways that things were going. But again, when we first met this man, he suffered from depression and has, you know, some other, you know, PTSD stuff, but he would recognize that it was going on and then use it to justify why he wasn't taking care of things. And he started sharing, and he shared about how as soon as he noticed that he was off, he reached out to his mental health case manager and then advocated for himself. So he got directly to the person who prescribes his meds, and then appropriately advocated for himself so that he could get his medication changed to something that he thinks might be working better. And then here's where the facilitation and the clarity and, again, the trauma focus came. I said to the rest of the men, these two men have just set a high bar for the rest of you. And they went deep, and you guys need to decide for yourselves. And every single man, including the guy who came there for the first time, who said he wasn't even sure if he belonged there, went deep into the issues. And so trauma informed doesn't mean that people are just talking about trauma. What it means is that you're aware that trauma may be showing up and interfering, and that you're always dealing with people from the perspective and the respectful position that you might be dealing with or running into somebody's trauma response. And I want to talk about those boundaries for addressing, because some of our facilitators are not therapists. But the boundaries are either way. You're saying, I'm a therapist and I know what to do, but this isn't the place for me to do it. And we even had a man today who came in with something, and we said, this is something where you may want to go back to the counselor that you saw before if you like them and they helped you and they're still around, or you might want to engage with another counselor and get some of this checked out for yourself. So we're validating that it's there. We're validating that it's an issue. We're not doing the trauma work, but we are aware of it. We're sensitive to it. And when you create, and this is an ongoing process, this was not a group of men who were meeting together for the very first time. Although one person, it was their first time, another person, it was their, second or third time. But when you create the safe space, which you do by being respectful and being clear and presuming the competence, which is different than presuming that people are intentionally, do you understand, knowing all of the harm that they're causing, because in many cases they don't. And then there are the critical connections. Okay. My opinion only. Part of the conceptual clarity, you should not be doing this work if you don't have a strong connection with Domestic Violence Survivor Service Organization. You need to know your referral sources, and this is what Lisa was talking about. You need to know what your community's needs are. What many people don't understand about the HEAL program, because now we run, 14 groups a week. We have 2 groups for women. We do trainings, we do all these things. But here's how HEAL started. HEAL started because I was connecting into the community. I was working on a grants to encourage arrest. Task force, and they divided us up by county, and they said, figure out what your biggest problems are in your county and see if you can begin to find some ways to solve them. And the woman next to me said, well, we can't get a intervention program into our agency. And she worked for community corrections. And I said, well, that's easy. And she said, what do you mean it's easy? I said, well, I can do that. And she said, how could you do that? I said, give me 3 men in a room. And that's how we started. Me and 3 men. You need to know substance use programs and what their different philosophies are, because sometimes they inadvertently give information that makes it more dangerous for somebody's partner. And you should understand things. One of the things that happens is that sometimes in sessions, I have to slip into substance abuse lingo for somebody who's in recovery in order to help them take something that they're already doing in one part of their life and see how it applies in the other part of their life. Knowing what mental health services are out there, what food services are out there, being involved with your coordinated community response. Our county has currently gone more to a smaller group of people meeting, so different communities. So I'm actually attending 6 different CCR meetings now, because they're trying to take it back. They are not trying to take it back. They're taking it back down to what does this community need? What does this community need? And so now we're going to talk about this idea of stages of change, which I'm sure some of you are familiar with, but we're going to highlight how the HEAL curriculum works within this concept of stages of change. And everybody gets a workbook, and all the assignments are in there. And what we tell them is there's no invisible fencing. You guys know what invisible fencing is? Yes? No? No dog owners here? So nobody knows what invisible fencing is? Joe, could you unmute and tell people what invisible fencing is?
There's a little, well, there's a little gizmo around the dog's neck. And then there's electricity around your yard where the boundary is. And if the dog goes through it, they get a little zap on their neck. So they begin to learn where that fence is. Eventually you can take that off because the dog now knows where their boundary is and where they cannot go.
And it has a beeper too. It beeps. So they get a click too that tells them. Right. But there's no invisible fencing in the book. Just and they can see and participate in everything. The man whose first group it was today was able to follow and understand the man who was sharing Sankofa exercise. So stages of change, as you may already be familiar with, starts with pre-contemplation, which is when somebody really hasn't made any changes. They're not even sure that they want to make a change, and even if they have an idea of just they're not. Maybe there's something there. Contemplation is the part where they have an awareness there's a problem, but they're not necessarily committed to any action. And then the preparation phase is when they begin to be ready to take action to address the problem. And so they're building the skills up that will make it so that they can take action. And when they move to action, they begin the process of modifying their behavior and then working towards the sustainable change. And so we're going to go through these pieces, and I'm going to take you inside what happens in these different phases, in these different stages, and how they match up with the stages of change model. We also have an open door return policy. That means that when somebody finishes the program, they can come back at no charge as long as they don't reoffend.
Let's start at the very beginning. A very good place to start.
So the first part of the program, okay, is that people are in the pre-contemplation stage. Many of the people believe, like the man who came in today, he's like, I'm not even sure this is the right place for me to be. They're not sure there is a problem. And even if there is a problem, they're not sure it's a problem that has anything to do with anything we're offering. They're also not thrilled to be here because many of the people are court ordered, or even their partners, you know, ask them, because we accept voluntary people in our program. And like some of the other people we're talking about, we not only have voluntary people, or, you know, people who are sent by their partners, but I have men who send me their sons, their brothers, their cousins, their nephews. One man sent me his father. So here's the philosophy in this section of the program. They walk in the door and they expect that we are going to convince them that they need to be here. And what we do, and you see our little phrase, and these phrases that you see here, this is what it actually looks like in the workbook. Okay. So what we tell people is, you know, I mean, so I got here because of the one time I got caught. I belong here because of all the times I didn't. So the way in which we do that is that they have one assignment to get out of this section of the program. And that is to create a resume that either says, here's what disqualifies me from being here, or here's what qualifies me to be here. Here are 5 things that I've done in my life that qualify me to be in a program like this. So if somebody only has 1 arrest, right, the other 4 are either going to be things they never got arrested for or are not arrestable at all. Because most abusive behavior is not arrestable. And they have to be able to present, and we give them a formula, we give them rules. Actually, Joe, you guys will witness somebody working on this just on Monday when you came to visit. And if you guys want to know about visiting, instead of me talking about it, I'm going to put Joe on the spot a little bit later and let Joe talk to you about it, because Joe actually came to a group this week. But so remember, these people are in the pre-contemplation. They're not even sure they've got a problem. But if they have to create their own 5 reasons, and here's the thing, what people hear is, let me tell you why I don't want to be here. Let me tell you what somebody else did. Okay. So if I tell you that, you know what, I need to lose 10 pounds, and sorry, Joe, I'm going to pick on you, that I need to lose, you know, that 10 pounds, and I'm like, oh, I'm in this program, and I'm like, I don't even know why they sent me here, because Joe needs to lose 15. That is nothing, that doesn't disqualify me. And so they have to give things, so the kinds of things that disqualify you, the man who came in and said, I'm not going to participate, do any of the exercises, and I'm going to waste everybody's time. The man said, that's a good reason for you not to be in here with us. You know, the man who told us, you know, I sell drugs and I'm going to sell drugs in your parking lot. We said, that's a pretty good reason for you not to be in this program. But any of you ever have, anybody here have experience with toddlers? Okay. So remember paradoxical intention? Oh, I don't know if you could pick up those toys. Right? And that's what this is. This is paradoxical intention. This is designed to get them to a place where they can acknowledge there's a problem. That's it. That's all we want them to do. They have to be able to do all 5 reasons in 10 minutes. And at the end of that time, the group votes for them to move on. So it's really important to understand that. I see your hand, Alicia. I'll get to you in 1 second. It's really important to understand this, because the people who make the no reason, they think that what I'm going to say is that we said Alicia doesn't need to be here. And that's not what we said. You're saying we send a report that says Alicia said Alicia doesn't need to be here. And then they get to take their 5 reasons that convince the group and share them in court. Do you see the way that flips? So this way, we start off right from the get. They helps them move into that contemplation stage. Alicia, did you have a question?
I do, and it's kind of on that subject. So when we talk to the guys about, the no reasons and the reason you don't want to be here, they just tell us that we're not going to give that to you because you're just going to report back to court and I'm going to go to jail.
And I tell them, I report to court that you made a case to be here. It doesn't make any difference to me. You can make a yes case, you can make a no case, because my report says either Alicia made a case to be here or Alicia made a case not to be here. Sometimes when somebody makes a case to be there, and this is where your coordinated community response is important, because I've had judges who said to somebody, okay, tell me one of your reasons. Is that helpful to you? You understand? It's fine to, I'm not going to report it, because what I report to the court is either you made a case to be here, you made a case not to be here. If the judge wants to know more about that, well, then you need to think about it. Because the case to not be here is only things that exclude them. Most people don't even get that far, because all of their no reasons are things that aren't going to pass. They say stuff like, well, I have to work 12 hours, a day. Anybody else here have a job where they have to work extra hours? Well, that doesn't disqualify somebody from being here. Well, I didn't do everything that was on the police report. Anybody else here who doesn't have, well, he made a case to be here. Jason, so the key is it has to disqualify them. And that's what you want to focus on. So I let them do whatever they want. They come in, they bring their stuff, they tell us, those things. Well, what happens is that most of those things will not disqualify them. And then we move. So what happens is after the group votes, and again, that's presumption of competence. That's the group taking responsibility. So he presents all 5 in 10 minutes. The group votes. Then he picks 3 participants to give him formal feedback. Plus he gets feedback from whatever facilitator or facilitators are in the room. And the nice part about that is you get to learn about him and you get to learn about the group at the same time, because who he picks tells you something about him. Does he pick the man who for the last 3 weeks has been challenging him? Or does he pick the guy who's been there for 45 minutes? And you listen to the kind of feedback that your participants are giving each other. Men who've been there for a while generally give thoughtful feedback about what they've observed. Alicia, I noticed that when you first came here, you didn't think you had a reason to be here and you were frustrated when we gave you feedback. But I'm glad to see that you did that and that you've stuck it out and that you took the feedback. presumption of competence. These guys, do you understand? As a group, you're not going to fool them all. And they share what they've seen inside the room. Now, sometimes you get people who say, good job. But sometimes people give them advice. One guy yesterday gave feedback to somebody, and he said, I would suggest that you start getting your name on the board every day and get working on your assignments. And then they move into cornerstones, and it changes. Now, and the other piece that goes with this is how people introduce themselves. So when people come in to the program, they introduce themselves. You know, my name is Juan. Yes, I have a reason to be here. Or no, I don't have a reason to be here. Here's one of my reasons. And I was accountable or unaccountable in the last week. When they move to cornerstones, their introduction changes because there's not going to be any more no's. Okay, so now it's going to be, my name is Juan, and I have a reason to be here. I read one of my 5 reasons, and now I add to it, I did this because, and here are the tactics I used. And again, one way I was accountable or unaccountable in the last week was the domain that falls into. So cornerstones is our most didactic part of the program. There are 4 concepts that we want people to learn. We want them to learn the choice model, which is based and rooted in Erickson's work. We want them to learn about the accountability plan, the power and control wheel, and the SDR, which is something we created. And so in this phase, okay, they walk in the contemplation stage, and now they're in the preparation stage. These are the building blocks that are going to prepare them to be able to make the change, because you have to know what it is that your issues are. That's what the power and control wheel is about. You have to understand the process. That's what the choice model is about. You have to understand what you can do about it, which is what the accountability plan is about, and the SDR. So now they're in that preparation phase. Now I want to show you, this is a revised power and control wheel, and our program and Catholic Social Services ADA program are the only ones who have they have had the approval from Ellen Pence and Michael Paymar back in the day to make this revision. So what you'll see that's different specifically, so there's 3 things that are specifically different. The wheel is informed not just by the things that the women had said, but by the things the men said that, oh yeah, and we do this and this and this. And the section where the original power and control wheel uses minimizing, denying, and blaming, we switched to obfuscation. Someday ask David Garvin about what Ellen Pence said to him about obfuscation being added to the power and control wheel. And the part where it talked about using children was expanded to using others, because we recognize that people use institutions and family and friends also. And so we added that to this. So they do a presentation, and in their presentation, they do a choice model that shows that they understand the concept of how it works. They close their book and they're asked questions about their accountability plan, and they share their SDR. And so that's a 15-minute presentation. There are some exercises that they have to present, some that they may choose to present, but they don't have to, but they must complete. And there's no formal feedback when they move out of the cornerstone section of the program. And again, that was mostly logistical, not because we didn't think it would be good, but just because there's only so much time and feedback can take a little time. And then they move into the challenge section of the program. And the challenge section of the program is where the real work starts. Because in the challenge section of the program, they're learning about what were their beliefs about women. What were their beliefs about men? What are their beliefs about abuse? Where did they learn those things? How did those things manifest? How did it, what was the belief that they had? Sort of an overarching belief, a core belief that is an umbrella for their, again, through their 5 reasons, but also through their life, that allows them to engage in this kind of behavior where they're willing to be hurtful and harmful or abusive to somebody that they care about. And that's not going to come from a pretty place. So I'm not saying that they don't believe that people should be respected, but that's not a belief that's going to allow you to throw somebody down a set of stairs, spit on them, and then go have sex with somebody else. And so that's what they're working on in this, when they're in this part of the program. And where and how did it influence which tactics? Because then every man comes into group and they'll hear somebody else say, and they hear Barbara say something and they're like, oh, I would never do what Barbara did. Okay, then Alicia shares something and they're like, ew, I've done that. It doesn't sound so good. So depending on their beliefs, depending on their experiences, depending on their perceptions, that will influence which kinds of things that they're willing to use. And you know the saying, if you change a man's belief, right, his actions will follow. Presumption of competence. But you can't change something if you don't know what it is. So again, they've been through pre-contemplation. Now they're in the preparation stage as they walk in here. The way in which they introduce themselves in this section of the program is they introduce themselves. You know, my name's Barbara. Yes, I have a reason to be here. I've met and abused the following people. Okay, one of my reasons, right? Same reason, one of the 5 reasons that they already gave us, the foundational pieces. Then, you know, I did this because the tactics that I used, and now I'm sharing the core belief that allowed me to be abusive is. And one way I was accountable or unaccountable. And now they're not only telling us domains, they're also telling us bases. So they're moving into that action phase. And again, they have a 15-minute presentation to talk about their specific belief, how it was cultivated, how it showed up, and the impact that their choices had on other people in their lives. And then they move into the Sankofa section. And I already explained to you all what Sankofa means and why we, you know, put it in here. And in the Sankofa section of the program, there are those 16 assignments that I talked to you about that they have to do. So now they're in the action model and they're working towards maintenance. How am I going to sustain this? That's what they're going back to retrieve as they're doing this. How am I going to maintain this when I'm finished with this program? And so when they introduce themselves in Sankofa, okay, and I'm sorry, when they do their exit and challenge, they also get formal feedback. 3 peers of their choosing, plus whichever facilitator or facilitators are in the room. And here's a piece to understand with clarity, learning to be respectful, but clear with people. Okay, I say things to people. And again, I think Joe, you saw this on Monday, right? You saw somebody hear something and it really resonated with them. But here's the thing. People need to feel seen. And if I come in and I know I've been doing all these mean and horrible things, and all Joe tells me is how pretty my shirt is and how nice my earrings are and how, you know, I had pretty slides. Okay. I don't necessarily feel seen. But if she can see beyond some of those things. And so the men in the program look forward to the facilitator feedback. One of the ways that the interns in our program feel like they've made it is when they give somebody feedback and the person says, wow, it feels like you know me. Or I've heard that before. Or that really makes sense with who I am. Because what it means to them is that they actually were able to articulate something in a way in which somebody was able to accept it and see it and own it. And so in this section of the program, people introduce themselves. You know, my name is Joe. I have a reason to be here. Here's all the people I've abused. You know, I read one of my 5 reasons. This is why I did it. At this point in the program, we're pretty sure they know the tactics. We don't need to hear them tell us the tactics anymore. Now they're going to say the core belief that allowed me to be abusive is, and the belief I'm working to live by is. Okay, and to get through the Sankofa section is going to take somebody at least 12 weeks to get through all 16 assignments. And any of you know anything about adult learning theory, 90 days. 90 days is how long it takes for somebody to become comfortable, not the best they'll ever be, but to become comfortable with a new concept, a new skill, a new experience. So that means for 90 days, they are in that mode where they're hearing that belief that they're working towards. Because that's what we want them to walk out the door with. All right. We also, another component of our program, we use strategic use of stories and analogies. And we do this because it makes complex topics accessible. I told you earlier that, you know, my work was with kids. That was what I was going to do. And what happened was I was working in foster care and I had to explain the foster care system to children. Okay, adults can barely understand the foster care system. And so I started using stories and analogies to make it so that they could understand what was going on and how the decisions were being made that impacted their lives. And when I started working with adults, you know what I found out? They didn't understand complex topics. And I needed to use stories and analogies to help them understand. And so we created some, and it also creates teachable moments. Because in a curriculum that's open, you understand, where with revolving enrollments, where people are working at their self-paced, you're going to have to watch. Sometimes it's something somebody brings in the room. Sometimes it's something somebody's working on. Sometimes it's something that a lot of people are struggling with. And that creates your teachable moment, and stories are sometimes the way to do it, or analogies are something that you can use. And we strategically put things together to be able to make that happen. So I'm going to share with you our accountability story and how it came to be. So as you heard, everybody was talking about accountability, right, in the little sessions, I know, yesterday and today. Okay, and here's the thing about accountability. Everybody talked about it. Most of us used the we'll know it when we see it method. And not surprisingly, the guys told us that was a terrible way for them to learn. And if you listened again to people, to the people who were speaking today, David Adams and Scott Miller and Lisa Nitsch, okay, going and listening to what people are telling you is critical. So these guys are telling us, listen, this accountability thing may be great, but you guys are doing a terrible job of teaching it to us. And this started a 2-year journey, which I'm going to share with you what it ended up with. That now the men in the program are really, think this is really cool. So the first thing we recognized was we had to have a definition, because it turns out that when you look up the word accountability in the dictionary, first of all, it mostly talks about external accountability. And second of all, it uses the word accountable in the definition, which is against the rules. When I was in school, if I put the word in the definition, like, my teacher did not accept that answer. So when we talk about accountability, people say, okay, look at Barbara. Barbara was accountable for, okay, or accountable to. just in, or being held accountable by. But that doesn't take us to internal accountability, which was what we wanted. So we came up with a definition, and this is the definition we came up with. And we must be onto something, because apparently we get picked up by other yoga studios have picked us up. Other kinds of organizations have picked it up. Actions toward or involving others that reflect the integrity of the person you want to be. Think about yourselves. Think about some area in your life where you feel like you might need to make some change. The standard for what you want to be is different than the standard for where you are. And that's the standard we want people measuring themselves against. And again, very similar to some of the things you heard some of the other people talking about today. You're saying, is this a loving behavior when you're doing this? Right? You're telling me that you're a kind and generous person. Do you think that that was a kind and generous action? That's the definition that we use. And we explain the word integrity. And I will tell you the analogy that I use when I talk about integrity. So I have 2 gold necklaces. They are both brand new. They both have the exact same design on them. They're beautiful. One of those necklaces is gold plated, and the other necklace is solid gold. Anybody who's ever worn a necklace, seen somebody who's worn a necklace, been around necklaces, know necklaces get sweat on them. Hair gets caught in them. People take them off and put them down on tables or countertops, and they get knocked around. They get caught in stuff. They get, right, worn away. They get chipped. And your solid gold, your gold-plated necklace, eventually, whatever's underneath is going to start to show through. Now, your solid gold necklace may get the same experience, but underneath it, it will be solid. And so this, and we intentionally put that word integrity in there, and we intentionally explain what it means in a way that people can grasp it. Because integrity means to run true. And then I'm a systems person. And systems people just understand that what happens in one part of somebody's life impact all the other parts. And as we were in early years, when we were talking about accountability, we recognized that people often understood accountability in other parts of their life before they understood it in their intimate relationships. And so in the center of all of this, of the domains of accountability, we put together the various areas of people's life. So employment is any interaction that you have with your boss, your coworkers, your customers, your employees. If somebody's going to school or they're working on a certification because they hope to get a better job in order to keep their job, they are in the domain of employment. Community interactions, that's when they're driving on the road, interactions with store clerks, interactions with people that they're meeting in various places that they're going out in the community, interaction with probation or the court or individuals within that system. So if somebody's, again, involved with the Secretary of State's office, right, that is a community interaction. Because usually if you're going to the Secretary of State's office, it's because it's something that you need in order to be able to do certain things within our community. Self-care, we had to put this in because we needed to make sure there was a place for people to take care of themselves physically, emotionally, and spiritually. Remember that trauma concept. Okay, it's the place where people who are working on recovery might put the actions that they take for that. People who are, you know, the man that I was talking to you about this week, you know, who was working on his depression, you know, so he was dealing with it both, right, from an emotional perspective, what he was noticing for himself, and a community's perspective, dealing with the community mental health system. Extended relationships. This is family, but the family that it's referring to is parents, grandparents, aunts, uncles, cousins, friends, neighbors, whether you know their name or not. These are people who are a part of your life and your world. Parenting. This includes biological children, whether you live with them or not, whether you pay support, whether you see them or not. Stepchildren, children of partners, same thing, whether they live with you or not. One of the men today, as he was talking about some decisions that he had been making, which included not informing the probation officer about his inability to pay for his tether. Okay, but in the meantime, he's talking to us about his new job, and the guys are like, yeah, but this impacts your kids when you do this. All because you didn't think to call your probation officer and talk to them about it. And the last, of course, is intimate partner. Now, what you need to understand about intimate partner is once somebody crosses into this domain, they never leave. Because, and think about yourselves, anybody that you had an intimate relationship with, do you understand? It's forever influenced by whatever that intimate relationship was about. And so intimate relationships is somebody I had sex with one time and never saw again, all the way to somebody I never had sex with, but I dated or spent time with them or was interested in seeing if they might be interested in having a romantic and or sexual relationship with me, and everything in between. So just because I'm divorced from somebody or we're not together as a couple anymore, that does not move that person into extended relationships. Now, the other thing that was really important to us and to the men who are helping us create this is those arrows go both ways. I should be getting something from those systems, and I should be giving something back to those systems. And so it's not about, I feel good about my boss giving me a raise. That is not self-care, because it's always about me. It's about me feeling good about myself in my domain of employment. So people you got initially, that was one of the places where people got stuck, and we had to really clarify that. And then I don't know if you guys have ever had these discussions, but we did. So we would, Joe would share something and everybody would be like, oh, good, Joe, that's really accountable. And then they would say, Joe, could you have been more accountable? Or do you think you were as accountable as you were last week? So we would have these terrible discussions about more, being more accountable or less accountable, as if there was a scale. And again, we went through all kinds of analogies with the men and until we came to this one. And so if you notice, in the pitcher's mound is life. Because in baseball, when you go up to bat, you don't get to say to the pitcher, listen, I had a tough day. Please don't send me any tough pitches. In baseball, you have to be able to hit whatever is thrown at you. And so it is with life. You have to learn how to be accountable no matter what is thrown at you. There's no trick to being accountable when things are going your way. Anybody can do that. It doesn't mean that they do it. It just means anybody can do it. But the trick is, can I be accountable even when? And then we talked about the bases. And so baseball, okay, first base. So accountability is when somebody acknowledges something that they've done. So I talk with my hands. And so I spill a bottle of Coke and I say, gosh, you know what? I'm sorry, that was me. I spilled the Coke. But that's all I do. I'm just focused on the past. I read report after report that says Teresa was, great and really was accountable because Teresa said that Teresa did X, Y, and Z. But it's only focused on the past. Second base is, right? I spill the Coke and then I say, oh gosh, that was me. I'm sorry, I spilled the Coke. And then I either clean it up, buy a new Coke, or offer to pay for it. Because now I'm focused on the present. Now, third base is when I'm future focused because I know, first base, I've spilled Coke before. And I remembered that I had to clean it up and it was a mess, or I had to pay for it twice and that was expensive. So now I have a plan that whenever I have Coke, I put it far back in the glass. I watch where my hands are. I commit to that plan and I implement it.
Hey,
And
Jeffrie, I
yes.
don't mean to interrupt, but we have 1 minute left.
Okay. And then a home run is when I figure out it's not just Coke. We have foul balls and strikeouts. A foul ball looks like it's going to be accountable, and then it turns out to not be. Strikeout, no attempt at all. And see, I'm right at my very last slide. And so for Zoom, okay, our program adapted itself to Zoom. We had to add some rules. It did increase our flexibility, but there are privacy considerations and distractibility considerations that have to be addressed when you're working with Zoom. This is how you find me. I'm going to leave you with my very last piece, which is my definition of wisdom. My definition of wisdom is that I can now do on purpose what I used to do by accident. I always had good instincts. Conceptual clarity means that I can do it intentionally. And Joe, I'm going to invite people to come in and see. Can you just say one quick word about what it was like to come and watch?
It was fantastic. Really seeing this all in action. That's why I'm here watching Jeffrie get a little more behind it. Seeing it in action, seeing these guys own their stuff, own the program. There was a sense of empowerment by so many who had been there longer that even a guy who was new bought right into it because of the leadership of the guys who had been there before. It was fantastic.
Are there any other questions for me? Right? Can I hang out for a minute in the room if somebody wants to talk to me? Right? Because they're going to break.
No, we are actually not going to break. There's another session with Rich Tolman.
Okay.
That's
okay.
But you're more than welcome to stay here for a little while and then join us if you would like to in the next session.
Okay. So if there's anything anybody wants to ask me, I have 5 minutes before I have to go to group. So I did group this morning and I'm on my way to do group in 5 minutes. Thank you for coming. I hope this was helpful for you.
Fabulous.
Jeff, I just have a quick question for you.
Sure.
Can you give me a refresher on the meaning of the peacock and why we use it?
Yes. The peacock is the way for them to identify the actions, characteristics, and emotions, okay, that are part of who they are. It's a visual representation of what they put out into the world and what they're taking out just and how they see themselves, not necessarily how everybody else sees them. So when they do it in the first one, it's, you know, a lot of guys, like some guys will say, I didn't know how to do this very well. And so there's a lot of empty space. That's cool. Some people come in and they have got nothing but great things about themselves. Some people come in, they've got nothing but terrible things about themselves. And then they build on it. So when they move from acknowledgement and then they do the cornerstones one, they should be incorporating the kinds of things that they heard, right, from the feedback. And that's usually the place where we start asking, you know, how come, or notice if they include the word abusive in there. And then their colors can change, the way in which they put it together can change, so that they're explaining how they're doing it, how one was different from the next. Does that help?
Yeah, so there was discussion last week. The guys were asking about why we used the symbol, the peacock.
Oh, the peacock is the symbol of integrity.
Okay.
And the male peacock is the one who has all the pretty feathers. And ask the men, why does he spread those feathers? They'll tell you. It's to get those peahens to come and notice them. Well, guess what? Your actions, characteristics, and emotions are what you put out there that get. Do you understand? That's what attracts people to you. Now, the trick is that whatever was on any previous peacock has to show up on any subsequent peacock, but it might get a different place. It might get a different color. It might be surrounded by different words depending on how the person conceptualizes it. And what you may not know is the peacock that's in the book now is a legacy peacock. We had a different peacock before. One of our guys was a graphic designer. He told us our peacock wasn't that good. And so he made one for us and he gifted it to the program. Shauna, you had a question?
I did. So we use Heal as a second program here, and we don't have a program specific to women. And I'm wondering, is there a women's Heal program, or
So-
is this?
So the answer to that, yeah, well, no, it's not for both.
Okay.
Principles are okay. Principles are the same. Some
Yes.
of the principles are the same. Okay. But the program for women is called Weave. And Weave. Okay. And it's women exploring accountably violent encounters. And the purpose, again, names matter to me. So it's also about the fact that you have to weave in that in some cases they are not primary aggressors in their relationships, and or the vast majority of them have multiple layers of trauma in their history.
Yes.
So we have to weave those components in. We do use the same thing that you saw, the accountability thing, that's for everybody. Okay, like there's nobody who couldn't learn from that. You could take that to 6th graders and they could do it.
Yeah.
Okay. But the principles that you heard me talking about in the first session,
Yes.
okay, the open, open groups, people, sharing weekly accountability. We are a little bit less, women come in understanding there's a problem, which is different than the men.
Yes, I agree.
You understand? So most of our women enter at the contemplation. Do you understand? At the contemplation, preparation stage.
Yes.
So does that make sense? So yes, there are things that are similar, but it's different.
Okay. So
Trisha, we're working on our book for women.
You're working on a book for the women?
Yes. Yeah, we have some stuff, but we're working on some other things that we want to add into it.
Okay. So
thank you, Trisha.
How do I go about getting the Weave curriculum?
We don't actually have it like set up as the formal curriculum. Some people just consult with us. We sit down, we help you figure out what's going to work for your population.
Okay.
And then we do that.
Okay. All right. That sounds good. Thank you.
Okay. Barbara, you had a question for me?
I too am interested in the Weave program, and I'm also wondering about if we can, how that works. Can we use your programs in our programs?
Of course.
And how does that work? Are you selling those?
So here's the thing. So I'm a really good clinician. I am actually a terrible business person.
I love you then.
But somebody has to feed my book addiction. But part of it is that, so what happens is that it depends what people want. Some people pay for our time for us to come in and like you come and you say, hey, we're having trouble with this concept. And we say, well, we've got this exercise. And then you're saying what they're essentially paying for is our time to help them make their program conceptually clear and appropriate for their community. It also means that sometimes we look and we say, hey, you know, you're telling us you're doing this, but are you noticing that this doesn't match that?
Right.
So some people, that's how they do it. Other people buy the curriculum and then they pick pieces for themselves.
Okay.
Okay, so we do it. So it's generally one of those things of you talk to me, we figure out what you need, we figure out what resources you have, and we work to
Okay.
make something that makes sense for you.
Okay, I wrote down your name and number. I also wrote down your email. Do you prefer talking on the phone or emailing?
Well, I'm very cool. I can text too.
Oh, I hate texting.
So if somebody needs to get a hold of me right away, they need to text.
Okay.
Okay, but if you trying to talk to me can sometimes be difficult. Forget about just the time zone thing. I am doing, you know, a lot of groups. It's sometimes hard to catch me. So,
Okay.
but leaving me a message, you know, and telling me when I can call you back works. Sending me an email works.
Okay.
If it's urgent, put it on urgent, or send me a you know, just a text that says, hey, check your email.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. Thank you very much. I enjoyed your session today.
Thank you. I hope it was helpful.
It was very helpful.
So thank you for those of you who stayed around and listened some more. I have lots of you know, that you know, when our standard training is 3 full days. So, you know, there's a lot of depth into all of the things that we do, because everything that you saw me do with these 2 or 3, you know, exercises that I shared with you, that's what we do with every single exercise. Because if people understand what and how it was created and what it's supposed to do, it allows for adaptation. As opposed to people doing something. So for instance, in the book that Alicia's agency has, we have a rule about using names, and, you know, and we have the WHO acronym, but we use an OWL, right? But way back in the day when we first did their program, they said, hey, we've got people in our community where the OWL is not something that they're comfortable with. And so we changed that to their book has a got names image in it instead of the owl. Still says who, but it's got the got names in. So that's an example of how we customize something for somebody. And their agency also paid to have a book, you know, that had their own logo and their own contact information and stuff on it instead of ours. Okay. I do.
Question, do you have any? Can we observe your women's group yet?
Oh, people can always come and watch. Come on.
Okay. So I can
it's
just.
not that I don't know what I'm doing. I just haven't had time to write it all down.
Okay. I would like to come and watch one of those so that we can see what it's like. So I'll get hold of you.
Okay. Thank you, everybody.